It sounded like nothing at all. Snow swallowed footsteps. Wind moved through the pines with the soft hush of a thing trying not to be noticed. Even the moon looked muted, as if some unseen hand had rubbed its light into a dull smear across the sky. Everything that lived out here had learned the same lesson: be quiet, be hidden, be small, or be gone. Lyra hadn't learned that lesson soon enough. She lurched between two fir trees, the branches heavy with white, her cloak snagging on needles that stung through the fabric. A pain-hot pulse climbed her leg with each step, sharp as a knife, turning slowly in muscle. The trap had been waiting under a thin disguise of snow, a hunter's cruel patience. The metal teeth had kissed her calf and bitten down. She'd screamed then. A single sound ripped out of her before she had the sense to swallow it. She'd seen her own blood on the snow too bright, too alive, and for one terrible moment she'd thought the forest would answer. It had. Not with wolves, not right away. With ravens. They'd circled above the tree line, black smudges against the sky, calling to one another like they were already dividing her remains. Now, hours later, the blood had dried dark on her stocking. The wound still leaked in stubborn little pulses when she put too much weight on it. She'd made a crude wrap with torn cloth and desperation, and she'd stuffed snow against it to numb the pain, an old traveler's trick that worked only until the cold started to feel like hunger. Turned back. Her mind kept saying it, steady and reasonable, like a voice that belonged to someone stronger than her. But she didn't know how far back was anymore. The storm had spun her around. The forest had tricked her with paths that looked familiar, and then weren't. The trees here were older, thicker, closer together, and everything smelled wrong, sharp resin, cold earth, and something faintly animal. A wildness that made her skin prickle. Wolf territory. People in the villages spoke of it the way they spoke of curses, lowering their voices and glancing over their shoulders, as if the trees themselves might be listening. Don't cross the northern line. Don't hunt there. Don't wander. Lyra had crossed it anyway, not for adventure, not for pride, for bread. Winter didn't care about good intentions, and neither did empty cupboards. Her mother's cough had grown worse with every passing week, each wheeze a reminder that warmth cost money they didn't have. Lyra had taken a small satchel, a dull knife, and the promise she'd be home before nightfall. Instead, she had ended up bleeding beneath a moon that looked like a watcher's eye. Her breath came out in ragged clouds. Every inhale hurt, scraping at her throat. The cold crept into her sleeves, her collar, her gloves, every seam. It slid under her skin like water, patient and unstoppable. She stopped when her vision wavered. For a few seconds, she just leaned against a tree, pressing her forehead to the bark. The roughness grounded her. The tree was alive, solid, not like her, shaking and slipping. She forced herself to listen. No wolves. No snapping branches. No sudden hush that meant predators moving. Only the wind, low and constant. Maybe you're lucky, she thought bitterly. Maybe the stories are just stories. Then the sound came, not the wind. A thin, trembling whimper so small, it almost vanished beneath the hush of falling snow. Lyra lifted her head. Another sound followed, sharper this time. A tiny yelp, strangled and panicked, as if something had tried to cry out, but didn't have the strength to make it all the way. Her heart stumbled. Humans were good at ignoring suffering when it was inconvenient. Lyra knew that. She'd watched men step around beggars like they were puddles. She'd watched neighbors pretend not to hear a child crying behind thin walls. It was easier, safer. But this sound was young, helpless, and it was close. Before her mind could argue her out of it, her body moved. She limped toward the noise, using trees as crutches, dragging her injured leg through the snow in a wavering line. Her fingers went numb around the knife in her pocket. Not because she meant to fight, she knew how laughable. That would be, but because holding something sharp made her feel less like prey, the whimpering grew louder. She rounded a cluster of shrubs and saw it, a trap half buried in snow. Its jaws clamped around something small and gray. At first her eyes refused to make sense of it. The shape was too wrong, too much like a puppy, and not enough like one. A rounded head, soft ears pinned back, dark eyes bright with pain. A wolf cub. It tried to pull free the moment it saw her. The trap held firm. The metal teeth had caught its hind leg, pinning it to the ground with ruthless certainty. The cub's breath came in frantic puffs, and the air around its muzzle steamed. Lyra's stomach dropped like a stone. She'd seen wolves from a distance before, shadows running across ridges, the glint of eyes in twilight. But she'd never been this close. She'd never met one at eye level, and certainly not one that small. It bared tiny teeth at her, more instinct than threat. The growl that came out was so weak, it sounded like a plea. "Hey," Lyra whispered, and her voice shook as much as her hands. I'm not here to hurt you." The cub's eyes didn't soften. Pain doesn't allow trust to bloom quickly. Lyra knelt carefully, the movement stabbing her injured calf. She clenched her jaw against a cry. Her gloves sank into the snow, and cold soaked instantly through the fabric. The trap was crude, but strong iron jaws and a fixed spring. A hunter's tool. A killer's convenience. Her fingers hovered over it, hesitating. If she reached in wrong, it could snap shut again. On her hand, on the cub's leg, it could make everything worse. The cub yelped, struggling again, and the metal bit deeper. A small smear of blood darkened the fur at its ankle. Something fierce rose in Lyra's chest. Not bravery. She didn't feel brave. She felt sick and terrified and angry. Angry at the trap. Angry at whoever said it. Angry at the way the world always seemed to punish the weakest first. "All right," she breathed, mostly to herself. "All right, I see you. I'm here." The cub's ears twitched. Lyra looked around quickly. No sign of the hunter. No footprints nearby but her own, half filled by falling snow. The trap had probably been set days ago. The cub might have been caught for hours, or it might have been caught minutes, and she'd arrived just in time to stand inside the teeth of wolf territory. Her gaze darted to the tree line. The shadows between trunks looked deeper than they should. The woods watched in a way that made her skin tighten across her shoulders. Wolves were never alone. Everyone knew that. If there's a cub, there's a pack. Her throat went dry. Still, she turned back to the trap. "I'm going to open it," she told the cub softly. Like words could soothe bone-deep instinct. "But you have to stop fighting me. Please." The cub's eyes flicked to her face. It did not understand her language, but it understood tone, perhaps. Or perhaps it only understood that it was exhausted, and struggling only made the pain worse. It sagged, trembling. Lyra exhaled slowly. She pressed her palm against the iron to test it. The metal was so cold it burned. She found the thick spring, tried to judge the pressure, then shook her head in defeat. "I'm not strong enough," she muttered. And then she remembered the stone. Travelers learned little tricks, not because they were clever, but because the world forced them to be. Leverage mattered. A trapped wheel. A stuck door. A snapped ankle. Survival was mostly improvisation. Lyra scanned the ground until she found a rock half buried near a tree root. She dug it out with numb fingers. It was heavy enough. Not perfect, but heavy enough. The cub watched her with wide eyes. "It's okay," she whispered again. "I know it hurts." She slid the rock beneath the spring mechanism, wedging it carefully. Then she used the knife, not to cut, but to pry. The blade slid under the metal, and she pushed down with her body weight, ignoring the tremor that ran up her arms. The trap creaked. The cub jerked, panicked, and the jaws snapped tighter for a heartbeat before the rock held. No. Lyra hissed, fear surging. No, stay still, please, please. She shoved harder. Pain lanced through her leg as she leaned in, and her vision flashed white at the edges. For a moment, she thought she might faint right there, forehead pressed to iron, breath short and desperate. But then, clack, the jaws loosened. Lyra didn't waste the moment. She grabbed the top of the trap with both hands and forced it wider. Her gloves tore slightly. The metal fought her, stubborn and cruel. The cub whimpered. Almost, she gasped. Almost, sweetheart, just with a final shaking push. The trap sprang open. The cub's legs slid free. For a second, it didn't move, as if it couldn't believe the pain had stopped. Then it scrambled backward, dragging its injured hind leg behind it. Eyes never leaving her. Lyra fell back into the snow, breath heaving, the knife slipping from her numb fingers. It's okay, she said softly, though her voice sounded far away, even to her. Go find your mother. The cub hesitated, tilted its head, nostrils flaring as it caught her scent blood, fear, smoke from a village hearth long gone. Human, its ears twitched forward. Lyra tried to smile, to show she meant no harm. But her lips felt stiff, and the effort pulled at exhaustion like a thread unraveling a whole garment. The world began to spin, not dizzy heavy. Like the night had decided she'd carried enough, and now it was pulling her down. She attempted to stand. Her leg buckled immediately. A laugh bubbled out of her, thin and broken. So that's it, she murmured. That's what saving a wolf gets you. The cub took one step forward, another. Its eyes, still bright with fear, now held something else to confusion, perhaps. A strange young curiosity. It gave a small sound, not quite a growl, not quite a whine. Then it turned sharply, limping into the brush, vanishing between the trees like a shadow slipping into a deeper shadow. Lyra watched the place it disappeared. That relief washed through her, warm and dizzying, because at least it was alive. At least the world had spared someone tonight. Her lashes fluttered. She didn't notice how the forest changed, how the wind seemed to pause, how the ravens fell silent in the branches, how the shadows between the pines shifted, rearranging themselves into shapes that were not made of snow or bark. She didn't hear the soft padding of Vok. Pause. Didn't see the tall figure stepping out from the dark. Like a myth wearing flesh. Lyra's cheek pressed into the snow. It was so cold it should have hurt, but she barely felt it. Her last coherent thought was oddly simple. I hope the cub makes it home. Then the dark took her completely. Above her, hidden by the trees, golden eyes watched steady. Ancient and suddenly very, very awake. Kale had been tracking the wrong thing. He'd followed the scent of iron old, blood and fresh panic the sharp. Metallic tang that meant one of his wolves had been hurt. The bond that tied his pack together wasn't only loyalty and instinct. It was presence. A low thread of awareness that tugged at him when one of his own strayed too far. When fear spiked too hard. When pain pulsed too bright. Tonight, that thread had snapped tight enough to wake him from a half-sleep in his den. A pup, not a grown hunter, not a scout, not even one of the reckless adolescents who liked to prove themselves by chasing elk in deep snow. A pup's fear was a small thing in the pack mind, usually muted by the steady warmth of the den, by the press of bodies and the sound of breathing. But this fear had been sharp and alone. Kale moved through the forest without sound, bare feet finding purchase where snow drifted thick and soft. Winter air slid into his lungs like clean glass. The cold did not bother him. It sharpened him. It made everything crisp, every scent, every whisper of movement. every broken twig that didn't belong. Behind him, the knight followed. He was not followed by guards or advisors, not in the way human kings were. The northern pack didn't announce its ruler with banners. The forest itself did that. It quieted when he passed, as if even the wind knew better than to challenge him. Still, he wasn't alone. Two shadows moved at the edge of his awareness, his beta, Rurik, and the pack's swiftest scout, Senna. They stayed far enough back to avoid startling prey, close enough to answer a command. Kale didn't need to look to know they were there. Their breathing and their sense were part of him. Familiar as his own hands, the pup's fear flared again, and Kale's jaw tightened. Hold on. He crested a low ridge and caught the stronger scent. Blood and snow. Human and wolf mingled with rusted iron. The smell of a trap. His nostrils flared, and something old and vicious stirred in his chest. Humans. Not all humans hunted wolves. Most were too afraid to come this far north. But there were always a few with greed in their bellies and metal in their hands. They didn't see a pack. They saw pelts, teeth, a trophy for a wall. Kale moved faster. The trees opened into a small hollow. Moonlight pooled there, pale on the snow. And in that light, he saw the pup first small, gray, limping, fur matted at its hind leg. It stood near a half-buried iron trap. The jaws sprung open. Alive. Kale's breath left him, slow and controlled. Relief was not a thing he often allowed himself. But it pressed at his ribs all the same. You're safe. He sent through the bond, a steady pulse of calm. The pup's fears shivered, then eased like a knot loosening. Its eyes turned toward him, ears flicking, and Kale heard its whine, not with his ears, but with the pack mind. It hurts. But I'm not caught anymore. Kale took 2 steps forward, and then he saw her. A human woman lay half on her side, half face down in the snow, as if she had simply decided to rest in the most deadly place possible. Her cloak was dark, stiff with frozen blood near her calf. Her hair spread across the white, like ink spilled from a broken bottle. She did not move. Kale stopped so abruptly that even Rurik and Senna paused behind him. The forest felt. Wrong around her. Not cursed. Not poisoned. Just strange. Like the world had expected one story and was now forced to rewrite itself. He crouched beside the woman, careful. Humans carried blades. Humans carried tricks. Humans carried fear, and fear made them unpredictable. But she was unconscious. He brushed snow from her cheek with 2 fingers. Her skin was cold, too cold, but not corpse cold. Her lashes were dark, her lips pale, her breath faint and uneven. Kale pressed his fingertips to the side of her throat. A pulse beat there. Weak but stubborn. Alive. A sound came from the pup. A tiny whine then. Across the bond, a sensation like confusion. She opened it. The pup sent, emotions tangled and unformed. It was biting me. And then it wasn't. Kale's gaze snapped to the trap. The rock wedged under the spring. The knife lying in the snow nearby, dropped and forgotten. He looked back at the woman. No human would come into wolf territory alone. Not in winter. Not without cause. And no human would save a wolf pup caught in iron. Not with blood already running down their own leg. Not unless something inside them was either terribly foolish or painfully kind. Kale's throat tightened. In the old laws of the pack, debts were not coin and not words. A life saved was a thread tied tight. It bound 2 beings together, whether they wanted it or not. That bond could be honored with gifts, with protection, with blood if necessary. To ignore it was to invite rot into the pack's spirit. Rurik came closer, eyes narrowed, sniffing the air. Human, he muttered, the word carrying disgust and warning. Senna's gaze flicked to the tree line. A hunter could be nearby. Kale's ears caught the distant creak of branches, the whisper of snow falling, the far-off call of a raven. No obvious threat. Yet the trap itself was evidence enough that danger existed. "She's bleeding," Senna added, softer now. Her voice had the shape of reluctant sympathy. Rurik's lip curled. "And she's in our territory. That's reason enough to—" Kale raised his hand, and the beta fell silent instantly. Kale stayed crouched, staring at the woman's wound, at the torn cloth wrapped around her calf, at the dark stain that had frozen along the fabric. The trap that had caught her had probably been meant for a wolf. Or a deer. It didn't matter. Metal didn't discriminate. "You see the trap," Kale said quietly. Rurik glanced at it, expression still hard. "It could be a lure." Kale's gaze didn't leave the woman's face. "She freed the pup." "That's what it thinks," Rurik argued, but his words held less certainty now. The pup limped closer to Kale's leg, pressing its small body against him, as if to insist. "She did. It sent," with a rush of simple truth. "She made it open," she said. "Go home." The bond carried the echo of the human's voice, distorted but unmistakably gentle. Kale's eyes narrowed. He'd lived long enough to know lies. He'd lived long enough to know when someone's actions didn't fit their supposed nature. Humans feared wolves. Humans killed wolves. Humans set traps like this one. Yet this one had knelt in the snow and used her last strength to save a cub that belonged to the very creatures her kind whispered about in terror. Kale stood slowly, lifting the woman's head a fraction to check her breathing again. She made a small, involuntary sound pain. Maybe then went still. Too long out here. And she would die. Rurik's expression tightened as Kale slipped an arm beneath the woman's shoulders. "You can't mean to bring her back," Rurik said. Kale's voice was calm, but the authority beneath it was iron. "I do." "She's human," Rurik insisted, as if Kale had forgotten. "You know what happens when the pack sees her inside the den." "I know what happens when the pack sees the pup alive," Kale replied. He lifted the woman fully into his arms. She weighed less than he expected, as if winter had already tried to carve her down to nothing. Her head lolled against his chest, hair brushing his throat. He could smell her wood smoke, salt, and blood. Beneath it, something clean. Something stubborn. Senna stepped forward, eyes on the woman's wrapped leg. "She won't survive the walk if you carry her like that," she said. "Her blood is already freezing." Kale shifted his grip, securing her closer, tucking her into the warmth of his body and the heavy fur mantle draped over his shoulders. "Then we don't walk," he said. Rurik's eyes widened. "You?" Kale glanced at him, and the beta stopped speaking again. Kale inhaled once, deep, and let his controls slide not into chaos, but into something older. The beast beneath his skin stirred, ready, familiar. It didn't frighten him. It was him. Bones did not crack. They flowed, muscle rearranged under the skin like a tide. His senses sharpened until the world became a web of scent and sound, and then the Alpha King was no longer shaped like a man. A great white wolf stood where Kale had been. Moonlight glazed his fur with silver. His eyes remained gold. Senna and Rurik shifted as well, their forms melting into their own wolves, dark and sleek for Senna, massive and iron gray for Rurik. The pup pressed close, tail tucked, then found courage in Kale's presence. It limped to his side. Kale lowered his head carefully, nudging the unconscious woman onto his back. Senna helped, gripping the woman's cloak gently in her jaws and pulling her higher so she wouldn't slide. The woman remained limp, a fragile weight against Kale's spine. For a moment, Kale hesitated. Bringing a human into the den was a decision that could fracture the pack. The elders would hiss about old wars and spilled blood. The younger wolves would bristle at a stranger's scent. Some might demand she be thrown out to freeze the moment she woke. And yet, the pup was alive. The trap was open. The woman's hands, even now, were stained with rust and blood where she fought the iron for a creature that could have become her killer. Cale started moving, paws silent across the snow, carrying her through the dark dot. As they ran, the forest seemed to part for them. Branches shifted, shadows moved aside, and the wind turned at their backs. It wasn't magic, not exactly. It was territory. It was the North recognizing its king and letting him pass. Still, Cale couldn't shake the feeling that something else had changed. The bond between a human and a wolf pup should not matter to a king, but it did, because Cale had felt the pup's fear when it was trapped. And now he felt something else too, faint but real, an echo of the woman's exhaustion, the way her body clung to life like a nail dug into wood. She was stubborn, and she had chosen, in the moment she could barely stand, to save what others would call a monster. That choice was a kind of power dot. They reached the den near midnight. The entrance was hidden in a rocky slope, framed by twisted pines. Warmth rolled out, carrying scents of fire and many bodies. As Cale crossed the threshold, the pack's murmur rose instantly, low growls, startled huffs, the scrape of claws against stone. Dozens of eyes turned toward him. He shifted back into human form just inside the den, steadying the woman in his arms again. His bare feet hit stone, and the firelight painted his skin gold. The pack went still. Their alpha king stood in the den carrying a human. Silence, heavy and immediate, dropped like a blade. An elder Mara, silver-furred even in human form, face lined with age and authority, stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the woman's limp body. "What is this?" Mara demanded. Cale met her gaze without flinching. A life debt? A ripple ran through the den. Not agreement. Not yet, but recognition. The old law was older than anger. "She trespassed," someone hissed from the crowd. "She bleeds," another voice countered. Uncertain, Mara's nostrils flared as she caught the scent on the woman. Blood, trap iron, fear. "And why?" the elder asked slowly. "Does a human earn a life debt from the northern pack?" Cale's jaw tightened. He looked down at the woman's pale face, at the faint rise and fall of her chest. "She saved a pup," he said. The pup limped into the den behind him, as if to prove it. For a heartbeat, the pack held its breath. Then the pup lifted its head and let out a small, high sound that was undeniably a cry for home. The den erupted into motion, wolves converging, nudging the pup, sniffing it, checking its leg. The mother appeared, frantic and shaking, and when she saw her pup alive, her knees seemed to go weak with relief. A low, collective sound of emotion ran through the pack mind, warm, fierce, protective. Cale waited until that feeling had settled, until the pack had tasted the truth with their own senses. Then he looked at Mara again. "She used her last strength," Cale said, voice quieter now, but carrying to every corner of the den, "to free one of ours. She collapsed beside the trap. She would have died out there." Mara's gaze shifted to the woman again, her expression unreadable. "And you brought her here?" "Yes," Cale replied simply. "Why?" Cale could have said, "Because the law demands it." He could have said, "Because the pack owes her," but something inside him resisted making it that simple. He thought of the cubs, memory small and raw of a human voice saying go home. He thought of the iron trap, open, defeated. He thought of the way her blood smelled not like weakness, but like stubborn defiance. So he told the truth, because she did not have to, Cale said, and she did it anyway. Mara studied him for a long moment. Then, with a slow exhale, she stepped aside. "Take her to the healer," the elder said. "But know this, Alpha King, if she is a trick, the consequences will reach beyond her." Cale nodded once. "If she is a trick, I will bear it." that drew murmurs, some shocked, some angry, some uneasy. But no one challenged him further. Cale carried the woman deeper into the den, past the fire and the watching eyes, into a smaller chamber where the air smelled of herbs and clean water. The healer, a broad-shouldered woman named Illyra, rose from her pallet and frowned. "You've brought me trouble," Illyra said bluntly. "I've brought you a life," Cale corrected. Illyra peeled back the cloak, revealing the wound. Her hands moved fast, practiced, unafraid of blood. "Trap caught her," she muttered. "And she walked on it. Foolish." Cale's gaze flicked to the woman's face. "Not foolish," he said, quieter. Illyra gave him a sharp look, as if she heard the softness in that word. But she didn't comment. She cleaned the wound, packed it with a bitter-smelling paste, and bound it tightly. "She'll live," Illyra said at last, "if fever doesn't take her." Cale exhaled, a slow release of tension he hadn't named. He sat back on his heels, watching as the woman's lashes fluttered faintly. Her lips parted, a soft sound escaping pain, perhaps, or a dream. Her brow creased like she was still fighting the trap in her sleep. Cale's fingers twitched, resisting the urge to smooth that crease away. He shouldn't care beyond the debt. He shouldn't feel anything beyond obligation. Yet the den felt different with her in it. The air held a strange new note, like the first crack of thaw beneath ice, subtle, unsettling, and impossible to ignore. Outside the healer's chamber, the pack's voices rose and fell in restless waves. Cale knew what they were saying. Human. Risk. Why would a human save a wolf? What does the king see that we don't? Cale stared at the woman's pale face and found himself asking the same question. Not because he doubted she'd saved the pup. He'd felt the truth in the bond. But because he couldn't understand her. Humans were driven by hunger, fear, and greed, so he'd been taught. They wanted what the North had: land, fur, power. They took and took until nothing remained. This woman had given. Cale leaned closer, just enough to hear her breathing clearly. "Who are you?" he murmured, though she couldn't answer. As if the world mocked him. Her hand twitched faintly, fingers curling, searching for something. Cale watched those fingers. They were roughened, calloused. The hands of a worker, not a noble. Not soft, not pampered. There was dirt beneath her nails, and a faint scar across one knuckle. Hands that had done honest work. Hands that had fought iron for a pup. Cale's throat tightened again, and he didn't know why. The bond shifted somewhere. In the den, the pup's fear had been replaced with safety, with the warmth of its mother's tongue and the press of the pack around it. That comfort flowed through the pack mind like a shared sigh. It should have been enough to let Cale rest. But as he sat beside the unconscious woman, watching her cling to life, another sensation rose beneath the satisfaction. A warning, not from the forest. Not from his wolves. From himself. Because for the first time in years, Cale felt something like curiosity sharpen into need. He wanted her awake. He wanted answers. And deeper than that, deeper than law or debt, he felt the faint, dangerous tug of something that could become attachment. Cale stood slowly, forcing distance between himself and the pallet. He turned toward the doorway. Rurik waited there, arms crossed, expression grim. "You're making the den uneasy," Rurik said lowly. "I know," Cale replied. "This will divide them." Cale's eyes flashed gold in the firelight. "Then they will learn to stand on both sides of truth." Rurik's jaw clenched. "You're speaking like this is fate." Cale looked back at the woman one last time. She lay still, breathing shallowly, a fragile human shape wrapped in wolf furs. He didn't answer at first. Because he didn't want to admit that the word fate had already crossed his mind. Outside, the winter wind howled against the rocks. The North did not forgive mistakes. It did not soften for kindness. And yet, tonight, a human had saved a wolf pup. and the Alpha King had carried her home. Kale stepped out into the den's main chamber, the pack's eyes following him as if he were something new and uncertain. He lifted his chin. "Guard the entrances," he ordered. "Double the patrols. Someone set traps inside our borders." The pack stirred, anger flaring, purpose snapping into place. That, at least, they understood. Kale's gaze went to the den's mouth, to the darkness beyond the rocks, to the silent forest where Ironid waited beneath snow. "Find who did it," he said, voice like winter itself, "and bring me their scent." As the pack scattered to obey, Kale felt the weight of the unconscious woman still in his arms, like a memory he couldn't put down. Life that a human in his den, and the uneasy sense that the forest had not delivered her by accident. Lyra surfaced from darkness the way a drowning person surfaced from deep water sudden, desperate and disoriented. Warmth wrapped around her first. That was the strangest part. Warmth was not supposed to exist in the northern woods at night. Warmth belonged to hearths and kitchens and the smell of boiled roots. Warmth belonged to home. Her eyes snapped open. Firelight flickered over stone walls. Furs covered the floor like pale waves. Shadows moved, tall and restless, stretching along the rock as if the flame were trying to warn her of something. Then she smelled it. Not smoke, wolf, thick. Wild scent pine resin and animal musk and something metallic underneath, like steel that had never been forged by human hands. Her breath hitched. Her body tried to sit up on instinct. Pain lanced through her calf. A sharp gasp escaped her and turned into a choked sound that barely counted as a scream. She grabbed for her leg and found tight bandages, warm against her skin, smeared with something bitter and herbal. "Don't." A voice cut through the fire crackle, deep and steady. "You'll tear it." Lyra's head whipped toward the sound. A man stood a few paces away, half in shadow, as if he didn't wish to crowd her. He was too tall, too broad-shouldered, and his hair silver, like moonlight spilled over stone, caught the firelight in strange ways. He looked carved out of the dark itself, but it was his eyes that froze her blood. Gold, not hazel, not brown, not the warm honey gold of a kindly villager. Molten gold. Predator eyes. Lyra's chest constricted. The world narrowed to a single awful thought. I didn't survive the forest. I just woke up inside its mouth. She scrambled backward, dragging her injured leg until the edge of the pallet dug into her spine. Her hands searched wildly for something, her knife, a rock, anything. The man lifted both hands slowly. His palms were empty. "You are safe," he said again, like he was speaking to a frightened animal. "No one will harm you here." "No one." Lyra's voice broke. She swallowed hard and tried again. "Where am I?" "My den," he answered. "My—" Her gaze flicked across the chamber. Stone, fire, furs. A narrow doorway that looked like it opened into a larger space. "Your den?" "Yes." Her mouth went dry. "Your?" A wolf. A faint shift crossed his expression. Not surprise. Not denial. Something like acceptance of a truth he didn't bother hiding. "I am the Alpha King," he said, calm as snowfall. "Kale." The title hit her harder than the word wolf. She'd heard that name in stories, whispered between adults when they thought children were asleep. Not Kale. Exactly, stories never agreed on names, but the idea of him. A king of wolves in the northern woods. A ruler who could take human form. A beast crowned by winter itself. Those stories always ended the same way. Don't go north. Or you won't come back. Lyra's fingers curled into the fur beneath her. Why am I alive? Kale's gaze lowered briefly to her bandaged leg. When he spoke, his voice held no amusement, no cruelty, only blunt truth. Because you saved one of mine. Lyra blinked. Her mind stumbled back through memory. The trap, the cub, the iron jaws, the tiny whimper that had cut through her fear. Her hands pushing, prying, shaking with pain. I freed a wolf cub, she whispered. You did, Cale confirmed. A long moment stretched between them, filled by the pop and sigh of the fire. Lyra tried to steady her breathing. I didn't do it for a reward. Cale's gaze lifted. The fire caught his eyes, turning the gold darker, like sunlight at the bottom of deep water. I know. Something in the way he said it made her feel seen uncomfortably so, as if he had read her thoughts the way villagers read weather. Lyra's throat tightened. Then why? Bring me here? Because you would have died. That was too simple. Too clean. Nothing in life was that clean. And your pack just agreed? She asked, forcing the words out. They let you carry me in? Cale's jaw tightened, a subtle sign that the answer wasn't gentle. They did not all agree, he admitted. But they will obey. The chill that ran through Lyra had nothing to do with winter. Power sat on him the way fur sat on a wolf-natural, unquestioned, dangerous dot. She glanced at the doorway, at the dark beyond. How many are out there? She asked. Cale didn't turn his head, but Lyra had the strong sense he knew every movement in the den beyond. Enough. Her heart pounded. So I'm a prisoner? No. The word landed like a stone. You are a guest under my protection. Guests in human halls could still be trapped. Guests could still be bargaining chips. Lyra licked her lips, tasting fear. Protection from what? Cale's eyes narrowed as if she'd asked the wrong question. From the cold. From the hunters who set traps. From my pack's anger, if you provoke it. That last part was said gently, but it wasn't comforting. Lyra forced herself to stop shaking. I want to go home. Cale studied her for a moment that felt like being weighed on a scale you couldn't see. When you can walk without reopening that wound, he said, you will not make it through the forest like this. Lyra's hands clenched. That sounds like when you decide. A flicker crossed his face, something sharp and wolfish, but he didn't raise his voice. That wound is deep, he said. You walked on it. You bled in snow for hours. If you leave now, you die. I will not repay your act by letting you die. Lyra stared at him, searching for mockery, cruelty, manipulation. She found none. That made it worse, in a way. A monster was easier to understand. A monster fit the stories. This man, this wolf king, didn't fit anything she'd been told. The silence swelled until it pressed at her ears. Lyra shifted her gaze away first, because staring felt like inviting something she wasn't ready for. That was when she noticed the small shape at the edge of the chamber, a wolf cub gray, limp still visible, but steadier than before peeked around a pile of furs. Its eyes were bright, alert, and fixed entirely on her. Lyra's breath caught. You? She whispered, and something in her chest softened before she could stop it. You're alive. The cub took 2 tentative steps forward. It wasn't afraid of Cale. Of course it wasn't, but it seemed uncertain of her, as if it didn't know what humans were supposed to do after they stopped being helpful. Lyra held very still and lowered her hands, palms open. Come here, she murmured, then winced. No, don't, I mean. Only if you want. Cale didn't move, but his attention sharpened. Lyra could feel it like heat. The cub hesitated, then limped forward, sniffing the air. It approached her slowly, nose twitching, and then pressed its muzzle cautiously against her fingers. Lyra's heart twisted. Its fur was softer than she expected, thick and downy in places, still carrying the clumsy roundness of youth. It smelled of warm den and milk, and the sharp, clean scent of snow. You're okay, she whispered. The cub made a small sound that might have been a whine, then clambered awkwardly onto the pallet. It curled near her hip, as if it belonged there, as if this was the obvious conclusion to their strange meeting in the snow. Lyra didn't realize she was crying until a tear slid down her cheek and disappeared into the fur. Beneath her head, Kale watched the cubs, choice with an expression that shifted, subtle, conflicted, almost guarded. That's the pup, Lyra said, swallowing hard. Kale nodded. His name is Ash. Ash, Lyra echoed. The cub's ears flicked at his name, and he huffed softly as if pleased with being acknowledged. Lyra's gaze lifted to Kale again, a little less frantic now. Does his mother know he's safe? She does, Kale said. She has not left his side since we returned. Lyra let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Her fingers stroked Ash's fur in slow, careful motions, mindful of his injured leg. Kale's voice softened. You used your last strength for him. Lyra's mouth tightened. He was screaming. Kale's eyes narrowed slightly. So you answered. She didn't have a good response to that. She stared at the fire, at the way the light made the stone glow like something alive. I'm not a hero, she muttered. Kale's tone turned quiet, almost thoughtful. Heroes rarely think they are. The words settled in the air between them, heavy. Lyra didn't know how to carry them. Footsteps sounded outside the chamber more than one set. A low murmur of voices followed, too quiet for her to make out. Kale's gaze flicked toward the doorway. His shoulders tensed, the subtle readiness of a predator deciding whether to bite. Lyra's fingers froze in Ash's fur. They're talking about me. Yes, Kale said simply. Are they angry? Kale's pause was brief, but it told her everything. Some, he said. Others are afraid. A few are curious. None of them trust you yet. Yet, Lyra repeated. It sounded like a threat and a promise at the same time. Kale walked to the doorway and stood with his back partly to her, as if shielding her from whatever waited beyond without making it obvious. He spoke in a language she didn't recognize, low, rhythmic, edged with the harshness of winter. The reply came in the same tongue, and the tone was not friendly. Lyra caught only one word that sounded familiar, human, and the way it was spat like an insult. Kale's voice deepened in warning. The voices outside quieted, but she could feel their attention like cold fingers pressed against stone. After a moment, Kale returned, his expression controlled again. You will stay here until the healer says you can move. Lyra lifted her chin. I want to see the den. Kale's eyebrows rose slightly. You cannot walk. I can sit, she argued, or lean, or crawl if I have to. I'm not going to hide in here while your pack decides what to do with me. Ash made a small approving sound, like he agreed with her stubbornness. Kale's mouth twitched in expression that might have been the beginning of a smile. If he allowed himself such things? You have courage. I have panic, Lyra corrected. Sometimes. Sometimes, Kale said. They look the same. Lyra's eyes narrowed. Are you trying to charm me? Kale stared at her as if she'd spoken nonsense. No. His bluntness would have been funny if she weren't terrified. She shifted, gritting her teeth against pain, and swung her legs carefully over the side of the pallet. Her injured calf throbbed immediately, a hot pulse under the bandages. Kale was at her side in an instant, faster than any human had a right to be. He didn't touch her at first. His hands hovered, waiting for permission. You'll fall, he said. Then I fall. Kale exhaled, like patience was a discipline he practiced rather than possessed. Lean on me. Lyra hesitated. Everything in her screamed not to put herself within grabbing distance of a wolf king, but everything else, her pride, her anger, her need to face reality, pushed back. She set her hand on his forearm. He was warm, not just war meat, like he carried his own fire beneath his skin. His muscles shifted under her grip, steady and controlled. He didn't yank her closer. He didn't tighten to trap her. He simply supported. Lyra stood, shaking, biting back a sound. Ash hopped down and limped beside them like a determined escort. Cale guided her through the doorway into the main den. The space opened wide, cavernous and alive. Firelight painted everything in gold, in shadow. Dozens of wolves, some in human form, some not turned toward her as one. Lyra's heart stopped. Eyes watched her from every corner. Gold, amber, pale gray, dark brown. Some were curious. Some were hostile. Some held a cold, measuring intelligence that made her feel skinned without a knife. She forced herself to lift her chin. A low growl rippled through the den. Cale's posture changed, subtly, spine straighter, shoulders broader, presence expanding like a storm. The growl faded into uneasy silence. He wasn't just a leader here. He was gravity. An older woman stepped forward, silver hair braided down her back, skin lined with age, eyes sharp as flint. She wore a cloak of pale fur and carried herself like someone who had never once asked permission to speak. "That is her," the elder said, gaze fixed on Lyra. Lyra's throat went tight. "I'm Lara." The elder's eyes narrowed. Names mean little without truth. Cale's voice cut in. "Mara." The elder Mara did not look away from Lyra. "You are in the northern den," she said. "In the heart of our territory. Humans have spilled wolf blood for less." Lyra's hands curled at her sides, nails biting into her palms. "And wolves had spilled human blood too," she said, before she could stop herself. A dangerous hush fell. Cale's eyes flicked to her warning. Lyra swallowed, but didn't back down. "I didn't come here to fight," she added quickly. "I came here because I got lost. I got caught in a trap, and then I heard a cub crying. That's all." Mara studied her like she was deciding whether Lyra was prey or poison. "And why did you free him?" Lyra's mouth opened and then closed again. "Because he was hurting. Because it was wrong. Because she couldn't ignore that sound." None of those answers felt like they'd satisfy wolves who'd been hunted by humans for generations. So she told the only truth she could defend. "Because he was small," Lyra said quietly. "And because the trap was meant to kill. I know what it feels like to be powerless." Mara's gaze sharpened. Powerless. Lyra forced herself not to look away. Yes, the den remained silent, the pack listening in a way that felt almost physical. A movement broke the tension. Ash's mother, a sleek gray wolf in human form, pushing forward with her pup pressed close to her side. Her eyes gold like Cale's, but Wilder locked on Lyra. For a heartbeat, Lyra feared she'd be attacked. Instead, the mother stopped a few paces away and lowered her head, just a fraction. Not submission, acknowledgement. The pack shifted, uneasy. They understood what that meant even if Lyra didn't. Mara's expression tightened. "The mother honors her." "It is the law," Cale said. A younger wolf-human form, dark hair, sharp cheekbones stepped forward with barely contained anger. "Law can be twisted. Humans are liars. Traps are human. Blood is human." "She could be bait. Enough?" Cale said. The word was not loud. It was heavy. The younger wolf flinched as if struck and stepped back. Cale turned to Lyra. "You will return to the healer's chamber." Lyra bristled. "I'm not done. You are exhausted," Cale said, softer now, so only she could hear. "And if you press too hard, they will push back harder. I can hold them, but I cannot change what they have lived through in one night." Lyra's anger trembled into something else, understanding edged with frustration. She looked around at the pack, again at the scars she noticed now, the wary stares, the way the pups were kept behind older bodies. Humans had done this. Fear had done this. and she was standing in the middle of it, a single human surrounded by stories that had teeth. Kale guided her back toward the healer's chamber. As they walked, Lyra felt the pack's eyes follow like a tide. When the doorway closed behind them, she sagged against Kale's arm, exhausted. Her leg throbbed. Her head spun. Kale eased her down onto the pallet again, and Ash hopped up beside her, curling protectively at her side, like he'd appointed himself her guardian. The healer appeared stern, unimpressed. "You stood?" she demanded. "I stood," Lyra admitted. The healer's gaze flicked to Kale. "And you let her?" "She insisted," Kale said. The healer grunted and began checking the bandages. "Stubbornness is only admirable when it doesn't kill you." Lyra lay back as the healer worked. Eyes drifting to Kale, he stood near the fire now, arms folded, gaze fixed on the flames, as if they held answers he didn't want to find. "You don't like this," Lyra said softly. Kale's eyes flicked to her. "Like what?" "This," she repeated. "Me, a human in your den. Pack angry. Elders watching you." Kale's jaw tightened. "It is complicated." Lyra let out a weak huff. "That's one way to put it." The healer finished and left them alone, muttering something about idiots and kings who brought trouble home. Silence settled again. Lyra watched Kale for a long moment. "You could have left me," she said finally. "In the snow." Kale's gaze sharpened. "I did not, I know." She swallowed. "Why not, really? Not the law. Not the debt. You could have honored it another way. Sent your wolves to guide me out. Dropped food by the border. Anything." Kale didn't answer immediately. His eyes returned to the fire, and when he spoke, his voice was lower. "I have seen humans set traps and laugh as wolves scream," he said. "I have seen humans starve pups by killing their mothers for fur. I have seen men bring their children to watch, as if cruelty is a lesson." Lyra's stomach turned. Kale continued, calm but edged. "So when I found you bleeding, shaking, and still choosing to save a pup, I could not fit you into what I know." Lyra's chest tightened. "So you brought me here to—" "What? Study me?" Kale's eyes flicked back to her. "To keep you alive." "That's still not a full answer," Lyra said, quieter now. Kale's gaze held hers. In that look, Lyra sensed something dangerous. Not hunger, not threat, but the tension of a rope pulled too tight. Duty on one side, curiosity on the other. Something unnamed tugging beneath both. Kale's voice dropped. "When you fell, you did not smell like fear alone." Lyra frowned. "I was afraid, yes." His eyes narrowed. "But there was something else. A refusal. Quiet defiance." Lyra stared at him, suddenly unsure of her own breathing. "That's just being stubborn." "Maybe," Kale said. "Or maybe it is why you survived long enough to free him." Ash shifted beside her, pressing his warm, small body into her hip. Lyra's fingers found his fur and stroked absently, grounding herself. She wanted to ask 100 questions. What are you, truly? How does your pack work? Why do your eyes look like fire? Why do I feel like the room tilts when you look at me? Instead, she asked the simplest one. Am I in danger? She whispered. Kale's expression softened, just a fraction. Not while I live. The certainty in that answer was terrifying and strangely comforting at the same time. Lyra's throat tightened. And what happens when I'm well? Kale's gaze flicked away again. Then you return to your people. A sharp pang hit her unexpectedly like disappointment, quick and irrational. She didn't understand it. She didn't want to understand it. Because returning to her people meant returning to a village that would call her a liar if she told them she'd slept in a wolf den and lived. Returning meant hearing the old stories Again, wolves are monsters. Wolves are death, and knowing those stories were not the full truth. Returning meant leaving Ash, and leaving the strange, steady presence of the Wolf King whose eyes followed her like he was trying to solve a riddle he didn't trust himself to want. Lyra's eyelids grew heavy, exhaustion pulling her down. But fear kept her anchored. Cale moved closer, not invading, just near enough that she could feel his warmth. "Sleep," he said. "I don't trust you," Lyra whispered, but her voice lacked bite. Cale's mouth twitched again, that almost smile. "Good." Her brows knit. "Good?" "Yes," he said simply. "Trust is not a gift. It is earned." Lyra's eyes fluttered. "Then earn it." Cale's gaze held hers, steady and intent. "I will." The words were quiet, but they landed in her chest like a vow. Lyra drifted, half asleep, and felt Ash's breathing beside her, small, steady, alive. The den's warmth cradled her. The fire crackled. And through the haze of exhaustion, she sensed Cale's presence near her like a guarding shadow. Not a cage. Not a captor. A line drawn in the snow that said, not her. Outside, in the forest beyond stone and fir, the winter wind howled angry, hungry, patient. Morning came to the den without sunrise-light, filtered and pale and indirect, sliding through narrow stone openings and reflecting off snow outside, turning the cavern walls the color of frost-polished bone. The fire had burned low during the night, leaving behind embers that glowed like a sleeping heart. Lyra woke slowly. Her body felt heavy, but no longer shattered. The pain in her leg had dulled into a deep ache, manageable as long as she didn't move too quickly. For a moment she lay still, listening, breathing, many breaths, different rhythms. The den was awake, Doc. She turned her head slightly. Ash was still there, curled tight against her hip, his small body warm and solid. His injured leg was tucked carefully beneath him, guarded even in sleep. Lyra smiled faintly, her chest loosening in a way it hadn't since before the storm. "You're getting spoiled," she murmured. Ash's ear flicked. But he didn't wake. Footsteps approached measured, unhurried. Cale appeared in the doorway, already dressed for the day. He looked different in the cool morning light, less like a creature carved from shadow, more like something forged from stone and sky. His silver hair was braided back, his shoulders bare beneath a heavy cloak of white fur. "You slept," he said. "I passed out," Lyra corrected. "That is still sleep." She pushed herself up slightly, testing her leg. Pain flared, but it didn't steal her breath. Progress. How long? She asked. "A night," Cale replied. "And part of the morning." Lyra frowned. "My mother. She will wonder where you are," Cale said calmly. "But not yet panic. We sent a scout to watch the southern edge. No word has reached your village." The fact that he'd considered her mother at all caught her off guard. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "I did." Cale replied. She studied him for a long moment. "You're very sure of yourself." "I am used to being responsible for lives," he said. The weight of that settled in her chest. Not pride, responsibility. It explained the way he carried himself, the way the den bent around his presence like it had accepted gravity. "I want to leave today," Lyra said. Cale's gaze sharpened, not with anger, but with calculation. "Your leg is not ready." "I can manage," she insisted. "I don't belong here. Every hour I stay makes it worse for you." "For the pack," Cale corrected. "Not for me. That's the same thing." "No," he said softly. "It is not." Lyra sighed, rubbing her face. "You can't keep a human in your den, Cale. Even I know that." "I am not keeping you," he said. "I am ensuring you survive. And if the pack decides I'm too dangerous, Kale's voice did not waver. They will not act against my word. Lyra searched his face for doubt. Found none. Kings shouldn't make promises they can't keep, she said. Kale met her gaze fully now. I do not. A pause stretched between them, thick, intimate, charged with things neither of them were saying. Ash woke then, yawning and stretching clumsily. He bumped his nose against Lyra's ribs and made a soft, demanding sound. Lyra laughed despite herself. Good morning to you, too. Kale watched the interaction, something unreadable shifting behind his eyes. You have the pup's favor, he said. I freed him from a trap, Lyra replied. That's not favor. That's basic decency. Kale's mouth curved faintly. Decency is rarer than you think. Later that morning, Kale allowed her to sit near the den's main fire, propped on furs with her leg elevated. The healer hovered nearby, pretending not to watch her every movement, while very clearly watching every movement. The pack gathered at a careful distance. Some stared openly. Others pretended not to. A few turned their backs in deliberate dismissal. Children Volf pups in both forms peeked from behind legs and pillars, eyes wide with curiosity. Lyra felt like a strange animal on display. Ash remained glued to her side, a living shield of innocence. His mother watched from across the den, her gaze sharp but no longer hostile. A young wolf approached human form, barely more than a boy, with dark curls and nervous energy. Is it true, he asked abruptly, that humans burn wolves alive? The question stunned her. Lyra swallowed. Some do, she said honestly. Some humans do terrible things. His brow furrowed. Why? The simple question cut deeper than any accusation. Because they're afraid, Lyra answered. And because fear makes people cruel when they don't know how to be brave. The boy considered this, then nodded slowly as if storing it away for later. He glanced at Ash, then back at her. You didn't burn him. No, Lyra said. I helped him. The boy's mouth twitched into a small smile before he was pulled back by an older wolf, who hissed at him to mind his place. Mara approached not long after, her expression thoughtful rather than sharp. The healer says you may walk short distances, the elder said. With help. Lyra inclined her head. Thank you. Mara studied her. Do not mistake tolerance for trust. I won't, Lyra replied. But I won't waste it either. Something like approval flickered in the elder's eyes. By midday, a scout returned with news. Kale heard it first. His posture changed instantly, tension rippling through him like a drawn blade. He spoke quietly with Rurik, then turned toward the den. Hunters, he announced. 2, perhaps 3. They set the traps and lingered too close to our border. A low growl rolled through the pack. Lyra's stomach clenched. They're still out there. Yes, Kale said. And they will not be for long. She pushed herself up on instinct. They could hurt someone else. Another cub. They won't, Kale replied. We will handle it. There was something in his tone cold, final, that made Lyra shiver. She didn't doubt his pack's ability. She doubted the cost. I don't want blood on my conscience, she said. Kale's gaze snapped to her. You did not set the traps. No, she agreed. But I'm the reason you're angry. Kale stepped closer, lowering his voice. I was already angry. She searched his face. Promise me you won't kill them. The den went very quiet. Rurik stiffened. You ask too much, human. Kale didn't look at him. He looked at Lyra. Those men hunt wolves for sport, Kale said. They would kill pups without hesitation. I know, Lyra whispered. But killing them won't bring back the wolves they've already hurt. Kale held her gaze for a long moment. Something warred behind his eyes, rage against restraint, instinct against choice. At last, he spoke. I will not slaughter them. Rurik's head snapped up. Kale, I said I will not slaughter them. Kale repeated, steel under ice. We will drive them out. Strip them of weapons. Mark them with fear they will never forget. Lyra exhaled, relief shaking her. Thank you. Kale's gaze didn't soften. Do not mistake mercy for weakness. I won't, she said again. The pack moved out swiftly after that, slipping into the forest like living shadows. The den felt suddenly hollow, too quiet. Kale did not go with them. You're not leading them? Lyra asked. They know my will, he said. And my place is here, with me, she realized. Yes. That knowledge settled heavy and strange in her chest, that the hours stretched. Lyra dozed, woke, listened. Ash played clumsily with her fingers, gnawing gently, and then apologizing with soft huffs when she hissed in mock pain. When the pack returned, it was with blood on none of their hands, but fear on the wind. The hunters would not come back as dusk crept in. Kale stood with Lyra near the den's entrance. The forest beyond glowed faintly blue with snow and moonlight. You should go tomorrow, Kale said quietly. Her heart sank, though she'd known this moment would come. I know, she replied. He handed her a bundle wrapped furs. Dried meat, a small carved token shaped like a wolf's head. What's this? She asked. Supplies, he said. And a marker. A marker for what? Kale met her eyes. For protection. Any wolf who smells it will know you are under my claim. Her breath caught. Your claim. Yes, that's dangerous, she said. For you. Kale's mouth curved faintly. I am already dangerous. She laughed softly, then grew serious. Kale, if I call for you, will you come? He didn't hesitate. Yes. The simplicity of the promise nearly undid her. She shifted her weight, wincing slightly. I don't know how to go back to my village after this. Kale's gaze followed the forest line. You will. Humans are good at pretending things did not change. That's not comforting. It is honest. Lyra turned to face him fully. You saved me too, you know. Kale looked down at her. I repaid a debt. No, she said softly. You chose to see me. The words hung between them. Fragile and dangerous. Ash padded forward, pressing himself between them, tail wagging faintly. Lyra knelt with a soft groan and hugged him carefully. Be good, she whispered. Grow strong. Don't get caught in traps. Ash licked her chin and sneezed. Kale watched, something tight in his chest. When dawn came, the pack escorted Lyra to the forest's edge. No one spoke. The snow was clean, unbroken, as if the night had erased all evidence of iron and blood. Kale stopped where the trees thinned. This is far enough, he said. Lyra adjusted the bundle on her shoulder. Her leg ached, but it held. She hesitated. Will I see you again? Kale's gaze searched her face. Fate is not quiet, he said. If it wishes us to meet again, it will not whisper. She smiled faintly. I'll listen. They stood there for a long moment, human and wolf king, neither quite willing to turn away. Finally, Lyra extended her hand. Kale looked at it, then took it warm, steady, enclosing hers completely. A life saved binds fate, he said, echoing words older than both of them. You are not alone in the north anymore. Lyra squeezed his hand. Neither are you. She turned and walked into the trees, each step carrying her farther from the den and deeper into a world that now felt wider. Kale watched until she disappeared.